Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to a special KubeCon EU edition office hours. Today, we are talking about the future of StackRox, and I'm going to hand it off to the one and only Josh Burkus from our open source program office. Josh.
Hey there. So this has actually been very exciting. As people watching probably know, Red Hat acquired StackRox earlier this year. We have with us Michael Foster and Chris Porter from StackRox, who are going to talk a little bit about what they have been doing since then, and about some exciting plans for the near future, and maybe even a fancy new website. So do you want to introduce yourselves and what you do for what your maybe your old title and your new title?
Yeah, sure. Hey, thanks for the intro. That was pretty spot on. I'm Mike Foster. I was a cloud native advocate at StackRox, and now I got a product marketing title at Red Hat. So excited to be here. I'm looking forward to doing more technical content, specifically on the StackRox side a little bit more. So yeah, Chris, go ahead.
Hi, this is Chris Porter. I was the director of solution engineering at StackRox, and now I'm the director of solution architecture at Red Hat. Big change.
Yeah, it's been
same kind of role.
Been a fun change. Yeah, and
yeah.
Josh, you nailed it. We're just looking to talk to you about what's changed the last couple months. Talk to you about community. First, I think I can hand it over to Chris because I know we want to go over some changes, what's happened since StackRox has been acquired, a lot of the new functionality that we've added, and hopefully open the floor, I think, to some questions.
Great.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, let's start with that. If you're familiar with StackRox as a software company, we focused on Kubernetes native security, and that mission really hasn't changed. We have always supported the enterprise Kubernetes platform, the OpenShift platform from Red Hat. Quite a few customers using that today across, enterprise, government. For our customers, the StackRox product is really about, about the Kubernetes native nature of it, right? So it's a security product, but it's also Kubernetes native. And, the thing that we hit upon here at StackRox was that, this product can not just work with Kubernetes. It's not just a container security product that happens to work with containers on OpenShift, but rather actually leverages the platform. So I like to talk about this in terms of, what the developers get. Like the advantage of choosing security through this approach means that you get to preserve the power of the OpenShift platform, right? This cloud native development. And the insensitive security products that are out there that deal with virtual machines and other security topics just kind of miss out on that opportunity. Like we love the flexibility of the platform. On the other hand, the security team has real concerns, right? When you give a lot of the power to the developers, there just needs to be a little bit of oversight, that we're trying to make both sides happy here. There's often conflict in organizations between, the go at 1,000,000 miles an hour new development, cloud native, but at the same time, there's a security team that's trying to, hold the brakes here to say, hey, we've got to make sure this is all secure before we go out into production, or we have compliance concerns that we have to address, right? There's got to be an adult in the room who says, hey, we have to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's here. So, at Red Hat, it's still the same product that you hopefully know and love, the same focus. The idea here is a product that is, reliable and Kube native, right? Making use of the capabilities that the platform provides versus trying to introduce a separate set of controls. If you like, I can show you what it looks like, and we can talk about some of the changes that have happened in the last few weeks. And I'll bring it up. So if you're currently a user of the StackRox product, or if you are new and if you've seen the demos, even very recently, even within the last couple of weeks, you'll probably remember the StackRox logo and the blue coloring. But one of the biggest visible changes that we've made is to put this in line with the Patternfly logo and colors that OpenShift uses. So for OpenShift users, this will be quite familiar, the same as the Red Hat OpenShift dashboard here, which we'll get into. just really to be in line with the product standards that are met here. Because StackRox has always operated on an agile kind of development model, we'll have new releases every 3 weeks, right? And that cadence has been kept up for the last few years here. It means that we can make incremental changes, we can rapidly roll out fixes and updates, and accommodate new feature changes from product management or from customer requests. If you're not familiar with StackRox, well, overall the product is here to help the security teams get what they need out of application security, right? It's visibility, it's understanding where common security problems like vulnerability management and configuration risk exist in the environment. It's about runtime monitoring, which is an extra layer of detail that's really kind of hard to get any other way. If you're a developer, this interface is, certainly interesting. I think it provides a lot of insight, especially when it starts to dig into things like networking to show you, what your microservice applications relationship to each other are. But we really don't want to force you into another interface, right? Security teams have their tools. Developers, let's say, they don't really like most security tools, right? As a developer, I don't want to have to go into some log somewhere else. I don't want to have to go open up a ticket and investigate why my deployment got stopped. What I want to do is work in the tools that I'm accustomed to using, right? And maybe it's a pipeline here in OpenShift, and I'm using this to build and deploy my applications. So if I've got a security issue, if I've got a vulnerability or something, I want to see it here. I want to be able to on demand, request a check from the security team to understand what I got to do to get this thing through the compliance gauntlet, right? Okay, I got to create a non-privileged user account. I need to specify a CPU and memory limit. So what I'm doing here is really we're trying to forge that DevSecOps culture. The idea that everybody has a stake in this. Everybody has this requirement or desire to build applications that aren't going to be an immediate security risk. And if I can do it with the tools that I have, and it is a failure that's spit out to me in an understandable way, I'm encouraged to go out and resolve that, right? Especially if I know, in particular, I've got, particular library, and I know there's a new version. I'm not being asked in this interface to go out and fix, libxslt, right, or BusyBox. I'm being told that, hey, upstream has a fix that I can incorporate that resolves a really serious vulnerability, right? And that's an easy thing for me to do. What I like about this is that honestly, as a developer, I've got a lot of different choices here as to what to do with this. Maybe I don't need these libraries, and I can go and remove them from the base operating system that I'm using in my container images, right? If it's not there, I don't have to maintain it. And securities then is going to stop bugging me about this. If I can switch to a different base image, maybe go to a more minimal base image that doesn't have all these utilities, then maybe I'm better off anyway. So the idea is we've empowered developers with this control over the infrastructure, right, of driving the application requirements, being able to make changes, right, that agility that gives me a quick resolution to problems. That same agility and flexibility here is what we want to do for security, right? It's really about saying, hey, OpenShift is a great platform for running applications on and handling infrastructure. It's also a great platform for security. So when we talk about things like vulnerability management, right, minimizing privileges and other configuration issues, restricting network access, everything here is done in that OpenShift shade, right? So, vulnerability scanning is one of those towering topics in security. It's a never-ending problem, right? New vulnerabilities being discovered all the time. What we're trying to do here is provide the security team with some idea of where the priorities are. Now, this one here, this demo environment is a really bad. It's full of these old fixable vulnerabilities, but where do I start to tackle this, right? This is often an overwhelming problem for organizations to understand, where do I start with this, right? Especially if you bring StackRox into an environment that's, well on its way, right? We're ready to go to production with this app, we're ready to launch. And you bring this in and you look at this list of these vulnerabilities, and it seems like an impossible task. And we sort of agree here, right? Vulnerability management is one of those things that's necessary to tackle, but it's only part of the picture. So what StackRox really pioneered was this idea of risk, right? That because of the declarative nature of a Kubernetes application, we know things like what kind of privilege levels does this have, right? What kind of network exposure does it have? And all of those decisions that are being made by the developer, right, to expose a port or to, run a privileged container or elevate, some kernel capabilities here, or my favorite down here on the bottom, run everything as a cluster admin on the role attached to the service account. Like all of this stuff has an impact on security. And so by changing those settings or by taking a recommendation to say, you really should be careful about running cluster admin. That's not something that we would expect to see. The system should not allow you to deploy this if you're trying to run, cluster admin or exposing a privileged port like 22. We're pushing back on the development teams to say, hey, there's a better way for you to approach this, right? Don't use X, use Y. If you're running as a root user, a privileged user account, there are ways within the infrastructure that you can go out and set a less privileged user account. So some of the recent things that we've done, if you haven't seen the product recently, we're now looking deeper into some of the Kubernetes API, so we can see when one of the users in the environment, for example, is execing into a pod, right? This means that they're like administratively accessing a pod. And, really useful, right? It's something that we want teams to be able to troubleshoot their applications, of course, but then security needs to know that someone on the DevOps team has administrative access to, in this case, potentially a sensitive application that has payment card data, right? And right there, that's going to violate a compliance standard like PCI, right? We have to have, even our developers, right, not be able to access that kind of sensitive private information. Because an insider threat, or worse yet, the fact that one of my developers can exec into a pod and run commands means that there's that interface available potentially for an attacker. One of the cool features that I think we talk about a lot here, because it's cool, right, is the networking part of this. And this is usually where a security team realizes that they're missing out on what's going on in these clusters, right? This spaghetti mess here is a diagram of all of my namespaces and my deployments, and it's showing me what we're observing in terms of the traffic. So really eye-opening, because Kubernetes applications tend to get more complex over time. I add new services, I'm deprecating certain services, but the pods are still running. So this gives you that bird's eye view of what's happening and what tools are communicating with what. But this is a diagram that shows me, all my clusters in one place. But more importantly, we're trying to give the hint to the security team about where the security risk lies. Right? I've got this front end environment, and somebody's running, a WordPress site here. If somebody compromises that, the problem here is that I can get further. Right? The attacker can move laterally within the environment, and that's not a new problem, right? That's segmentation, that's firewalling. It's a traditional problem in security, and one of the big topics. What's challenging here is just the nature of OpenShift and how that firewalling is done. And we've seen a lot of solutions out there in the marketplace that have gone and, they've built a container firewall, right? They have gone and created a solution that works on containers and operates at the node level or at the container level, and it solves the problem, right? The problem with that solution to that problem is, are you going to be able to live with it, right? Do you want to have to care and feed, this little firewall running in your containers? Are you willing to put up with that? And we're betting that most people don't, right? So what we've approached this problem from is that for all of my clusters here, OpenShift has a capability of building these kind of segmentation rules. The network policies are the right solution, right? Now, these are part of the Kubernetes spec. They're enforced in OpenShift by the container networking, but this is in line with what we're about, right? That there's a declarative approach to configuration that can improve security, right? This belongs in the code along with everything else. It helps to define the applications. Having your firewall rules in a separate product sitting off somewhere to the side violates that idea that your applications are driven by a single source code base, right? So this is in line with that model. Now, over the years, we've seen that network policy, originally wasn't all that widely implemented. It was incomplete, but between Red Hat and the other major Kubernetes platform vendors, this really has become the standard, and we think that that's the right way to do it. In fact, that idea of hey, go fix a security problem in the code is woven entirely throughout this, right? That when you have a problem with security, right, you've got a process where your images aren't getting up to date. You're including utilities that are useful for attackers like package managers. Our solution is go back to the code and fix the configuration that you provided that caused this problem in the first place, right? Or maybe the problem is you didn't supply a configuration, and unfortunately the defaults in Docker images and in Kubernetes are often designed for productivity, usefulness, right? Like get things running right away rather than thinking about the security. Now, the good news here is with OpenShift, this one's actually going to be a default the other way, right? The security default in OpenShift is actually that you can't run these things versus vanilla Kubernetes where you can. So, OpenShift gives you kind of a more secure configuration by default. It's a little bit more suitable for that security-minded approach. But still, there's plenty of power that you can hand over to your developers that results in them, potentially being, building insecure configurations there.
Awesome.
So is there anything else you want to see? I can spend all day on this.
Could
you
you just zoom in a little bit and just show people like the different panels that are on this main display here?
And while you're at it, we've had a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So I mean, first, for the sake of GoPro slow, I wanted to confirm. So this whole interface and everything this is all now specifically requires OpenShift.
So the product focus is on OpenShift, but the technology compatibility hasn't really changed. And so the goal is to provide for customers that are using OpenShift for the dashboard that actually allows for them to run this kind of oversight on other Kubernetes platforms as well. So the configuration here, the rules that we're using are very focused on Kubernetes. You will see, of course, that there are some things that are specific to OpenShift, right? And some of the features will not be available on other platforms. But the goal is from a single dashboard running in OpenShift that you'll be able to provide security for other non-OpenShift Kubernetes environments. Now, the StackRox product has never had as a support, as a subject matter, anything other than containers running in Kubernetes. So you won't see, cloud security topics. You're not going to see, perimeter security topics in here. But for containers in Kubernetes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Another question is, what are the parameters for setting the risk level? What are the different factors that get weighted together?
Well, there's
you mentioned like two of them, but somebody wants a list.
Yeah, a list. So everything in this product is really driven by policy, right? A policy means, a set of criteria that we're matching, a set of scopes that define what we want to look for that criteria. And it comes with a whole bunch of built-in policies, right? A policy really defines some conditions that we're going to be searching for in the environment. And it's woven throughout the product here. So the policies are what create risk. You can think of it as, every policy, for example, like this one has a low priority. These others have medium priorities. And you can think of that as a score. And whoever scores the most wins or loses in risk, right? So it's really kind of a summary of all the things that you're seeing here. And the customizability comes out of that, right? Maybe I don't care about, let's say privileged containers running. Now I probably do care about that. But let's say I don't care about, package managers and others. Like I can remove those risk factors here. You won't see that show up and you have control over that scoring. Some of it is a little bit more built in. In other words, we take things like reachability as a risk factor just because you've exposed a service, right? And I can actually, search for that and I can look for that exposure level. So that's not really configurable today, but it is something where, it comes directly out of a configuration that you've supplied. I've got these things listening on port 80. That's going to result in a reachability score and risk associated with that. what I like about that is, security products tend to have this model of, detect some condition based on some set of rules and then send out an alert. And we can do that too, right? I can send out alerts every single time I find, a vulnerability. But you typically run into that problem where everything is security tools really noisy and everybody just begins to ignore it. So there are things like this, like cool features that are part of Kubernetes, like running with a read-only root file system, right? So you get into the details of it. This is a setting that everybody should use it, right? If you're listening to this, like, there's no one setting that will get you a secure application. But if there was one shortcut, it's to make sure that your containers can't write to the file system. This eliminates a whole class of malware, right? The ones that are going to try to drop a payload onto disk and execute it. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things that really shows you that containers are different than VMs, right? Containers don't have interesting lives. They don't do lots of things. But the problem is that this is something that can be hard to get to, right? If you're a developer, if you're migrating an application from traditional infrastructure to containers, maybe you're relying on that, although you shouldn't rely on your file system sticking around. But it's useful to track it, right? It's useful for me to have this tracked in here as a risk factor, even though potentially today I can't do anything about it, right? Realistic security has to understand that the goal is to get better at security, that being perfect right off the bat is not possible. So I might want to know about this. It's a risk factor when I think about things like, I'm having some runtime activity that tells me somebody's running a shell in this deployment. Like knowing that the shell is running in there, knowing that a package manager is running along with the writable file system is a pretty ugly combination of risks. Even though I may not at this point be ready to go out and send out alerts that, hey, people are using, that file system. So useful to track for risk, even if I really can't do anything about this today. So.
Okay. I want to be conscious of time, and I know there's a second part to what you have to talk about today.
Yep.
Yeah. So just in general, one of the things I've always liked about StackRox is its like adherence to Kubernetes native like standards, right? Like it uses Kubernetes components to implement its security rules,
that's right,
and policies and everything else, right? Like from the beginning, from day one, y'all have said Kubernetes native, and that has made me very happy. And I'm glad we've acquired StackRox now, right? Like it literally feels like a hand in glove kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of good reason for that. And to be honest, it doesn't make everybody happy. People that are used to particular security responses, like they're used to managing a firewall independently from the application architecture, right? There's this dividing line between the assets that security controls and the assets that the developers control. We're trying to merge that together, right? It's all one source code base. If I had my way, somebody from that security team is going to be a code reviewer in the, on that pull request, right? I want to open up a new port for my application. That's a Kubernetes network policy that I've got to review, that I'm going to change. That's where the security changes happen. And the other part about using things like the admission controller that's built into OpenShift, right, as a security gate. When we enforce that way, there's no confusion about what happened. Right? Developers don't like security tools because they're often insensitive in the way they do this enforcement. It's a black hole that my apps disappear into, and I can't figure out and can't solve the problem. So the admission controller makes, it's like hitting a brick wall. You know what happened. You know immediately. You have the information at hand that you can use to resolve it. Right? Security is not trying to create a situation necessarily that is hard to troubleshoot. They want a clear communication of, hey, this is not acceptable from that risk perspective. And I think that using the platform makes a lot of sense. Your teams are going to be immediately familiar with it, right? It's not a new security action that takes place.
Right.
It's the same as if you made a syntax error in a YAML file you're trying to apply. Same exact situation that occurs. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and just to take over a little bit, because I know GoPro Slow was
Mhm.
talking
Anxious.
about, yeah, interested in what they could get involved with. So just wanted to announce that with Red Hat's obviously commitment to open source and a lot of the other projects that Red Hat has open sourced, StackRox is going to be one of them. So as you saw, Chris demoed the StackRox product, but it's now named ACS. So that's going to be downstream of the upstream project that is StackRox. StackRox going open source. It will be upstreamed, and yeah, we're looking forward to everybody contributing. I if Chris, if you don't mind, can you run to StackRox.io and share
Yeah.
the screen? Because Zoom is throwing a fit for me. So
Which Chris? Chris Porter? Chris Short?
oh, short. Yeah. Good point.
Okay. I got you. Hang on. Let's see.
Yeah, for everybody out there, if you want to check out the website, StackRox.io is going to be the home of the open source project. And we wanted to announce it to bring everyone into the community, throw a bunch of resources that we have at our disposal, welcome people if they want to write blogs, contribute. We can do that. If you want to talk about a security topic, we would love to have you. So yeah, we have a Slack channel, an email, and a bunch of other resources that you can get involved with as Chris Short brings it
Yes.
up. And I love that you have dark mode enabled already. That's perfect.
System default. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for picking up on that.
We love it.
So what's going on here on this site? Fancy stuff, right? Supported open source communities, cloud native, OKDE, Kubernetes.
Yeah, so we do office hours. We've done office hours every month. We recently did one that was on eBPF. So you can check out our office hours. We're trying to do once a month, and again, hey, we're trying to open them up too. So there's office hours, and we were looking to do something on Twitch if you wanted to do something more security specific with StackRox. So again, if you want to get more involved, send us an email, join us on Slack, and you can ping me. I'm on the CNCF Slack as well. So for now, it's a placeholder, and we look to bring you more and more information as things move forward, because the open sourcing process is a lot. There's a lot of considerations involved in setting up an upstream project. So we'll be with you the whole way through it. And honestly, I'm really excited for it. I'm glad that we could do this and honestly do this so quickly. So
yeah, this was a fast turnaround given other acquisitions Red Hat has done. Like I remember Ansible Tower took like a year and a half or so to open source. Like this was very quick.
Yeah, it was. We hit the ground from day one. So it's really honestly great to see everybody become so interested in security. I mean, you're looking at KubeCon EU right now, and some of the tracks we have like 101 tracks talking about security. So it's an awesome time, and I'm glad that people are taking security and Kubernetes more seriously.
Yeah, I just popped over to the community page here, and I'll drop that link in chat.
Yep. Okay. And yeah, we have some questions. We have obviously KubeLinter already as an upstream project. Any idea what's going to be next in terms of say named projects that are going to come out of the StackRox tooling? Do we even know that at this point?
For now, it's KubeLinter. There's some existing functionality that we wanted to add on to it. You can check that out in the GitHub repo as well. There's the project roadmap. I know that it's a developer focused tool. I recommend anybody specifically who wants to get started with policies in their CI to specifically check it out. It's just a low knowledge gap, really easy to implement on the CLI. So KubeLinter's one. StackRox is going to be two. I hope that there's more, but right now it's one at a time. They're pretty significant tasks. So
yeah.
And by the way, for those of you who are asking questions here, we see you, and for that matter, if you ask a question in here, we produced some KubeLinter shirts, which I think are the first ones that have been around, and we will be giving those away. And just watch the chat for how to claim yours. So we have a question here. Magno picked up on the comment, actually the discussion of a CNCF discussion of Falco, that we're going to be contributing upstream patches to Falco based on StackRox's work.
StackRox has always supported the Falco project, and as you saw, Robbie, specifically one of our engineers, Falco wants to move to graduating, and we just really supportive of the project, and we wanted to make it known. Robbie actually just commented last night about our support and how we supported graduating. So yeah, we're looking forward to just continuing to help that project in any way that we can, because especially with Falco and runtime security and Falco Sidekick, they're doing some great work over there. So it's awesome to see them move towards graduating, and all the best to them, and we hope to help them any way we can.
Cool.
Awesome.
But I understand that there's a number of things where there's been work done on like existing projects by the StackRox team that y'all have, due to acquisition and a lot of other things, had not been able to get around to contributing to those projects that are now going to be going ahead. Yeah.
That's I should have brought Robbie on, because that's more of a question for the engineering team.
Yeah.
When you're trying to contribute to these projects, there's a significant amount of back and forth to make sure that you do it in the proper way, right? Which is why you have these SIG governance, and why, as part of the graduation to CNCF, there has to be some sort of process for contributing. So yeah, it's we're currently in the process of working with Falco to make sure that these things are done in the proper way, and they've been nothing but helpful in bringing us on and talking to us through the process. So yeah, it's let's just say with Falco and the upstream stuff, there's more to come on that side.
Nice. I like the sound of that.
A lot of questions. Let's see. Man, I'm never going to try to pronounce this, Nick. Somebody wants to know, is there going to be any opportunities for students in the StackRox community?
Oh yeah, of course. Listen, I actually really like the thought of opening the floor for doing office hours, people coming in talking about projects, even if blogs, something as simple as, hey, this is how I'm protecting my kubeconfig files, and I just use a password and I'm encrypting my kubeconfig files, or mounting it at a specific time, and then the timer's up and it unmounts, or whatever it is, some simple project. You want to talk about it, and it's security focused. We'd love to have you write a blog. I think it's awesome to have people have works that are published on a public forum, with following community guidelines, obviously, and then we can use that as student projects for leverage for future employment and future work in the open source project. I think it's awesome. If you want to learn more, you can join the StackRox channel on Slack, the CNCF Slack. It's an open channel. You can also email community@stackrox.io, and you can learn more that way.
You mind if I put that in chat?
Oh yeah, I would love that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Magno's got a ton of questions. Magno's one of our good friends. He's hosting the Capture the Flag from KubeCon Security Day, which they did an awesome job.
Oh,
so
cool.
Oh yeah, that was very cool. I watched
really
that.
Well done.
That was awesome. If you have the chance, go back and watch that, folks. I'll dig up the link for it.
Speaking of which, actually, imagine you already do a lot of work with Kubernetes security, and the CNCF tag security now. CNCF groups are called tags.
There's a ton of stuff that they talk about. The meetings are really well done and managed by Tabby and Ian, and they're a great group, and they're beginning to get more prominence. I think the tag security is a good step forward in terms of getting plugged into a lot of these projects, because SIG security tended to just be /SIG /SIG security to get them onto issues, but there was really no necessarily process for following up. So yeah, we try to get tuned into that, just so that we can also know what's coming upstream into the project too. right? Like with PSPs and Docker deprecation and things like that, and contribute where we can.
Okay. I want to actually pick up on an earlier question that I promised that we would answer, which was somebody was, watching Chris's whole demo and that sort of thing, but they already have a deployment on core Kubernetes, and they were asking what tools work with core Kubernetes. And obviously those are going to be tools out of the community rather than tools out of OpenShift and Red Hat products. The KubeLinter obviously is the one that works today. Do we have anything else? Do we have anything else that we have planned enough to talk about it that will work with core Kubernetes?
Well, the StackRox commercial product does work with core Kubernetes, right? And you can see some of the stuff on the StackRox GitHub. These are, the things that our commercial customers are using with other tools. As you can imagine, with a tool like this, it has to be part of the pipeline and the tools that you're using in both your DevOps environment, so pipelines, chat ops systems, ticketing and others. It also has to work with, of course, the security tools. So there's a whole, suite of security tools like security event monitoring, logging, things like that it has to work with. And so that compatibility remains. In fact, part of what most of what drove us as a commercial product, right, was the tools that our particular customers were using. And with the open source community now, we've got, I think, a better potential to go in directions that maybe, our commercial customers aren't using, right? New tools and new ways of doing things. So some of the less popular CI/CD pipelines or emerging patterns around GitOps and things that, because they weren't in wide use among our commercial customer base, but will be more widely used in the open source community. I think we've got a chance to expand that compatibility. The Red Hat approach here, the support for OpenShift, doesn't mean that we're suddenly going to make it, OpenShift only, or that we're going to be, doing that. It means things like, single sign-on is going to be consolidated with OpenShift for our enterprise customers to enjoy just some convenience and assurance there. That doesn't mean that we're going to suddenly take away, some of these other the other integrations. Because the Kubernetes community has remained pretty, unfragmented, right? The API drives that whole community, that level of compatibility. And as Chris mentioned, the StackRox focus on leveraging that API really means that we can enjoy that compatibility out there. It also means that there's work to do when things like PSPs get deprecated, right? So our product has to keep up with that. And as new standards are emerging and are being proposed in CNCF, there's an opportunity there for us to take advantage of those new things. We're always thinking about, how does this new Kubernetes feature, how does a technology like service mesh, for example, enable us to do better security, right? And that's one of the things we're thinking about down the road. How do we get better security out of what is ostensibly an infrastructure and productivity convenience, but maybe we can leverage it for security. So we're looking forward to that part of it.
Yep. And also, how does that thing add risk?
That's right. It's not the first time where, a new platform that everybody's racing for, people think about security kind of as an afterthought. It's happened with cloud, it happened with virtualization. I suppose it means that, there'll always be opportunities for security folks because it gets thought of, second. But especially with the community focus here, we've got an opportunity to get ahead of that problem and say, hey, we can leverage this for better security,
without shifting the context too, which I think is big.
Yep, it's a tough line to walk. I mean, I think StackRox for the last 3 years as a commercial entity has proven that it is walkable, right? That we can maybe make the security teams happy and the developers happy at the same time. We can allow security people to come in and say, instead of being the team in the room that says no, we can't use this technology, it's too much of a risk. Now they can come in and say, hey, there's a way for us to leverage this, right? To take advantage, to be the the enablers of that business rather than just the folks who say no.
Yeah, I don't think you really had a chance to get to it, but there's a whole host of integrations, right, with other platforms. So yeah, one of the big thing is, people don't necessarily consider Kubernetes specific security until after, and they already have all these big contracts. And so how do you tie this in so that people aren't moving through all these different panes? And so if you didn't want to work with a StackRox UI, you could set up your alerts. Chris, there's a whole ton. I don't know, I'm completely blanking on some of them, but like, syslog, all your different SIEM integrations. So
that's right. Right. So when enterprises are selecting a product, right? I mean, that's the, the market that we're after is big organizations, right? As a commercial product, we needed to make sure this is going to work with the tools that they're using. And in some cases, that means bending some of the abstractions a little bit, right? So that it works with a tool like a Splunk, right? Or a Sumo Logic service, right? Security and event monitoring, we've got an incident that occurs. We think about runtime security as something that is a great way to inform our efforts to improve the source code for hardening against runtime attacks, right? Runtime is a place where we can learn a lesson and apply that lesson going forward, rather than just something that needs to be, just continually monitored. But, organizations have these processes built around monitoring, investigation, root cause, and that's something that we need to be in line with. The list of integrations, of course, leverages standards as well. And we've been able to do some really awesome things with that by getting information out of this product and into other systems pretty easily through, webhooks, even syslog. I thought that protocol would have died a long time ago, but here we are. It's 2021. SMTP and syslog.
Here we go.
Yeah. Oh man, it's bringing me back. So syslog still one of those standards, and there's more, right? There is a whole API where you can pull from this product as well. Like any good modern application, it's API first. So there's actually a lot of possibilities for doing things there. And again, we're looking forward to to what the community might propose for that. I'm looking forward to getting my hands into it.
Yeah, awesome.
I have to say that seeing our syslog in Kubernetes really terrified me. But the
fair enough.
Let's just say in the early aughts there were some major issues with our syslog that allowed me to take down a top 100 website. So okay, that's not really a question we can answer. So new StackRox community stuff. You've got blogs and things. You're looking for guest bloggers in the security community?
Yeah, it's open forum for people if they want to write blogs. Obviously, it's community guidelines that need to be looked over. So recommend emailing or getting involved in the Slack channel. Ping me if you were looking to talk about a specific topic. But yeah, so welcome towards the community if you want to talk about anything security specific. So, and then obviously that's going to be the place for announcements moving forward as we open source StackRox project. So it's and honestly, so happy that we get to keep the name.
Yeah,
StackRox and
cool.
Go open source. So
yeah,
hopefully those KubeLinter shirts and the StackRox shirts aren't going to be the last of them.
I hope not. I don't think so. I mean, the company names tend to become product and/or project names.
Yeah, it's. I think it was just one of those lessons from Elastic, right? You open source your project and name it Elastic, and then Amazon picks it up and calls it Elastic, and there's a whole host of issues that come along with those. So
yeah,
it's good to see.
Learning experiences, fun.
Yeah, It's why most of the time when stuff, I'm not saying most of the time when stuff originates here at Red Hat, we try to have a separate community name from the product name.
Mm-hmm.
So that also it really helps our people, right? Because we do have a whole large support staff, and when they get a call, they want to know what the customer is talking about.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So people just want to, I'm trying to figure out here. So people just want to talk about security topics. They go to Slack.
Yeah, if you're just interested and you want to ask more questions, there's an open forum on the CNCF Slack channel. It's just StackRox channel. And yeah, feel free to drop questions in. We'll answer what we can. As moving forward, there's a ton of people who work at StackRox in that channel, and it's the best way to get in touch with us if you want to learn more. Yeah, no heckling, Chris.
No heckling. I promise.
The so more engineering topics, if you don't mind me sliding into something else here. One of the big topics a lot of people have been talking about lately in relation to security is secure supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
Is there already features in StackRox for secure supply chain?
So there's definitely oversight of, where do my components, my artifacts come from, right? There isn't necessarily a restriction until a security team decides that they want to restrict that, right? So we err on the side of flexibility. Like, you want to pull down that 5-year-old image from Docker Hub, we're just going to be very transparent about what's in there. That you think about it, you're taking that on as part of your supply chain. You're taking responsibility for that. And we're going to show you the truth about how it was built and where it is. There's a lot of that abandonware out there. So no restrictions by default, but certainly most of the commercial organizations that I speak with are restricting that in an attempt to control that supply chain. I mean, SolarWinds has everybody absolutely on fire about this topic, right? Where are we getting this stuff from? Are we building, known vulnerabilities into our applications? So that's where StackRox, the ACS product here fits in with the larger picture of OpenShift, right? That OpenShift platform has capabilities and registries like Quay and image signing and other things that will provide security teams with more assurances about that. I got to say, I think like the problem with secure supply chain is it's actually easier in this case, right? You think about Kubernetes and everything that gets built coming from source code, you've kind of got that asset inventory. So many of the breaches that you see publicly are around, well, we have a maintenance process, we have a patching process, but we missed that one. We forgot about it. It was like somebody left that door open and we didn't even know there was a door back there. So I think that consolidating application strategies on a platform like Kubernetes and OpenShift actually has that benefit that nothing goes invisible, right? If we see every pod, we see every image that's in use, and there's a little bit more control over the source and the supply of those things. So without trying to break everybody's environment, the product definitely has features there to control that, but we're not there to dictate the terms of it to these organizations.
And it makes sense too. Kubernetes is so hard. I mean, Kubernetes, when you first fire it up, is pretty open by default, right? I mean, that's why clusters like OpenShift exist. So having that open by default, great to get started, really poor for security, right?
Oh, I remember when we flipped over to RBAC being compulsory as opposed to being an optional feature.
Oh yeah.
And that was one of our first points where people refused to upgrade.
Wow.
That's well, because if they didn't care, or they thought they didn't care, and they had a deployment process that simply didn't check for permissions, all of a sudden having to actually pay attention to permissions.
Yeah, I guess it is a burden at that point, but geez.
It must be a search engine allow me to find open Kubernetes API endpoints on the internet, right? Somebody's got to have one. Dark web somewhere.
Yeah.
Start searching.
I bet Rapid7 has a list somewhere.
Yeah.
I remember the list back when I used to work in Postgres, the list of open Postgres ports. Because Postgres is an enterprise database, and first rule of Postgres security is you never leave the Postgres port open to the internet, because a database port has to emphasize performance and functionality over security. And therefore default security rule is simply don't, restrict who can access that port. I think we discovered, 10,000 open port instances off a web host in Poland.
Yep.
Because people just do stuff.
Damn.
They had a product that didn't differentiate between internet and internet, and just deployed it as part of their cloud.
Yeah, we see the same pattern repeated, ad infinitum, right? MongoDB, S3 buckets, now Kube API endpoints. And, the Kube API endpoints, becomes a problem when you discover a CVE that allows an unauthenticated user to do certain things, right? And that was one of the big issues from last year that we reported on, and SIG security dealt with, right? So, and then of course, even when something is discovered and well known, people leave old versions running forever. And so, if you look at the top 20 exploits from 2020, right, published by NIST, cybersecurity, you see 3-4-year-old exploits, the same struts exploit that got Equifax, right? That exploit still exists in the wild, shell shock, right? And so, these things don't get solved overnight just because somebody has a fix published.
I will tell you, from having worked with power systems, as in power generation systems, Windows 95 exploits are still relevant.
Yeah.
Hey, we have GoPro wants to know, you mentioned supply chain attacks. Do you have thoughts on sigstore.dev? Any plans on working with and integrating?
Chris, do you know about that project?
I don't.
I was going to say, I think it, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris Short, but it has to do with basically cryptographically hashing images all the way through the supply chain, and then looking at runtime to verify that it's the correct hash and that nothing's changed over the process. I think it's a really cool project. I know Red Hat's actually contributing to that with Google, I think, in a couple cases. So don't know what the plan is, because I'm not that tied in with the product and what they're looking at in the future, but I think it's
reasonable.
I think it's reasonable to assume probably in like a 3-year roadmap, just because I think it's a great project that it will get tied in some aspect into OpenShift. So all right, I hope it does. I'm just looking in my crystal ball right now, so don't take anything I say for
right. Anything about the future is TBD.
Yeah. The thing is, there's so many potential tie-ins. Like I'm friends with Nisha Kumar of the Turn project, who's really focused on bill of materials. And I know that we've got folks in Red Hat SecOps who are also very focused on bill of materials for the whole Red Hat toolchain, right? Which has always been a thing for us. So
there's a talk at KubeCon, Accurix. I think it was an Accurix. I'm forgetting his name. I think it was John Kinsella did, about security nutrition labels for projects, which I thought was pretty interesting. Speaking of just, different implementations of, hey, you have this project or this microservice, and here's the security, the impact, just a nutrition label that comes with a project that's on GitHub for everybody to see sort of all the requests that it needs, and projects can also interact with that. And I thought it's pretty smart. Everybody recognizes nutrition labels. You don't have to be security focused to look and say, oh, this could be bad if I download it and run it, right? So there's a lot of cool projects coming out of open source security right now. So interesting to see it.
Yeah.
Contains 70% of the SecOps RDA of unauthenticated REST requests. That does sound like a cool thing. So we're almost at the end of our time here. So any last thoughts on state of security, on the new site and new community? Anything else?
Chris, I'll let you have the last word, but in terms of new things, just super excited that we got to get it out, and super excited that Red Hat is upstreaming this and opening it to the community to get involved. So excited for that. Again, Slack channel, email, ping us. We're glad to have you on board. So, Chris?
I think you need to distinguish between Chris's here on this one.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Porter?
There you go.
Here I am. I love the discussion here, and I'm looking forward to more of it. I think, what I really love about the community is all the ideas that come in. I love about StackRox, and as a background in security, the part I actually like most about this, and I hope the continue embraces this as well, is that security needs to work with the platform. We're trying hard to preserve the value that you get with this. So all the things that we've talked about, right? Restrictions and admission controllers and signing and everything else needs to remember that we're adopting these containerized, GitOps and DevOps, driven process for a reason, right? That the applications are there to benefit us, and we want to act in an agile way. I never want to see security take away that, hey, there's this exciting new component that someone's pre-built. We've got this thing that we can add in here to improve performance and deliver better features. So I think StackRox embraced that better than anything else I've seen. And I want the community, I hope, to preserve that. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Cool. Awesome. So we'll have more office hours this week because it's KubeCon week.
Right.
Posted a link in the chat for where you can find out to schedule those. And if you're here because you really care about security and you care about StackRox, the obvious place to go to continue the discussion is the new community, which you can reach off of StackRox.io. You are also welcome to drop by the Red Hat Slack chat for KubeCon on the CNCF Slack. But do visit the new StackRox community if you are a security geek, because that is there for you. Thanks,
Awesome.
guys.
Thank you all for joining. Thank you to the audience for participating. Really appreciate it. Next up at 1600 Central European Summertime, we're going to be talking about, come on, calendar, cluster management. So feel free to join us then. We'll be around on the Slacks and various channels here and there. And until next time, stay safe out there, folks.